Don't shoot your eye out, kid.
Hey guys, today we're going to do something a little different. We're not doing a disassembly or reassembly video. We're going to be talking about my experience with the handgun course from SDI. Lately, it seems there are a bunch of people that are calling it a scam, which wasn't my experience. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what I learned, and then you can judge it for yourself. We'll talk a little bit about the library you receive, the course material, the firearms, and the resources that you continue to keep after. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut in some stuff here. I'll cut in some of my assignments so you can see what I did and you can judge it for yourself. Just a shout out to the friends and mentors I met along the way, and let's go ahead and get started. So let's go ahead and go over the library. They send you 9 books, but they send them to you digitally. I went ahead and purchased the other ones and printed off these other books that are in the binders. So you get the Gun Digest book of Exploded Gun Drawings 4th edition, and it has the handguns and long guns. You get the Antique Firearms Assembly and Disassembly, the comprehensive guide to pistols, rifles, and shotguns. So it's basically just a bunch of old school pistols, rifles, and shotguns in there. You get the Gun Digest book of Centerfire Rifles 4th edition, the Gun Digest book of Tactical Weapons 3rd edition. You get the Gun Digest book of Revolvers 4th edition. You get the Gun Digest book of Rimfire Rifles 5th edition. You get the Gun Digest book of Shotguns 4th edition. You get the Gun Digest book Automatic Pistols 7th edition. And lastly, you get Gunsmithing Pistols and Revolvers 4th edition. There are other materials that you receive, and I'll show you that once we get into the actual courses. So next we'll go ahead and we'll look at all the tools that they send you. Alright, so let's go ahead and go over the tools that you get for the Handgun Specialist course. I used everything in here, I think, except for the RASP set that comes with FTH-101, but everything else I used. So you'll be using them in the courses themselves. So you get a nice Wind rotary tool set here, and you use that in striker fired. You get a nice little set of needle files here, which you do use. An actually pretty nice set of polishing stones. You get this clearing rod here, and this clearing rod is used for clearing obviously, but you're also going to take some measurements and twist rates when you use it. You get a Lyman trigger pull gauge. You get a Grace brass hammer. You get a Westward 8-ounce hammer. You get a set of Grace screwdrivers here, which are pretty good. Here on the end for striker, you have this striker sleeve set, and then you have a rear sight tool. You get a set of brass punches from Grace. You get a set of steel punches from Grace. Now these chemicals here, one's layout fluid and one is permablue. Use the layout fluid in the revolver course and use the bluing throughout some of the other courses as well for some of that spot bluing that you got to do. We'll talk more about this mass driver here that you get, and this goes to the striker pistol you receive, but you don't put it on until the hammer fired course, and we'll talk about that when we get there. You get a really nice Otis cleaning kit, which you'll definitely use. Now up here you can see there's some dummy rounds. You get 9mm dummy rounds, and you get 38 special dummy rounds. And here you get a set of go and no-go gauges for 38 and 9mm. You get a nice set of calipers. You use the calipers in the hammer fire course. You have to go through some measurements, and you'll see what I'm talking about there. And lastly, you get this little stippling gun here, which you do use in the striker fire course. Now there might be some stuff I'm forgetting, but this is going to be the base of what you get. But it's quite a bit of stuff. You do use almost all of it throughout the 3 handgun specific courses. Alright, so now what we're going to do is go ahead and we will talk about the courses themselves. There are 4 courses in the block. So let me go ahead and get the books out and we'll talk about that. Now for the actual 4 courses that you go through. We'll go ahead and cover them individually, but I've heard that it's all just a bunch of YouTube videos, which is incorrect. As you can see that these are pretty thick. And FT101 is basically just an introduction into mechanics and firearms. So you talk about some physics and cycle of operations and stuff like that. These two here on the end, there's several different resources within the courses themselves, and it's quite a bit too. There's legal definitions, there's timing, there's assembly, there's in-shake repair, there's all kinds of stuff, that additional resources. And for the manuals, basically my manuals book is for all the current firearms that I own, and it also has the schematics that come with the different courses. So you're going to be using schematics as well. So it's dense, guys. I'm telling you, it's dense. For example, here in Hammer Fired Module 1, this is all Module 1 here. And as you can see, it's thick. So the whole YouTube thing that I've heard about is definitely not true. So what we're going to do now is we'll talk about the courses individually, and I will cut in some of the work from the assignments that I actually did. We're not going to spend too much time on FTT 101, but we will cover it a little bit. So let me get these separated and we'll be right back. Now, before I forget, I didn't mention in tools, they send you a gun cleaning mat as well. So FTT 101, Mechanics and Firearms, is just basic mechanics. So they're teaching you how to set up a shop and physics and basic mechanics and firearms. Now there's no firearms sent for this course here. It's just basics. It's just like if you took wood shop or auto shop in high school or whatever, you don't get the grinder out the first day. You're going to be learning how things work before you get involved. Now, some of the things that are in this course here, now there are 5 lectures in here, and you can see this first lecture is kind of small. So it's just firearm safety and shop safety, some expectations, some considerations, and some career avenues that you might want to look into later on. Now, lecture 2 kind of went into some of the physics and how things actually work. The physics part was actually pretty cool. I learned quite a bit because I didn't take physics in school. Lecture 3, it gets into actually identifying how simple machines work and different mounting options, common anatomy, and you actually learn some of the industry terminology, which is a big help, especially when you're talking to other gunsmiths. So within this course itself, or within this lecture itself, you go through several of the main weapons that you'll be using. You have a 1911, you have a Remington, you have a Taurus. So they're teaching you basic operations. There's a shotgun in here. Most of you military guys will be familiar with the shotgun that the Army uses. And there's the AR in there. And how that kind of works is there's labs, there's virtual labs. Like I said, you don't get a weapon for this, but you actually go ahead and put it together in the final section of the course. And you can see like you go through cycle of operations, and each module has a knowledge check at the end. And of course, there's a quiz every week as well. Different system, the blowback, gas operated. So it's pretty dense. There's a lot of stuff there that you actually learn. It's definitely not all YouTube videos. And so here you see in part 5, they teach you, there's, the different tools and equipment, disassembly. And one thing that I will say that SDI is really big on is safety. If you have ammo on your table, you don't have your iPro on, expect a 0. So safety is a very big part of what SDI does. At the end of this course, you do a virtual lab and you reassemble, disassemble using your computer. And that's basically how FTT 101 went. It's just basics. You don't get a weapon. It's just so you can learn the cycle of operations for different weapons. And the reason for that is so you can kind of, once you start to understand how the cycle of operations work and the different types of operations, then you can start to reverse engineer and know how they work in your own mind. So that's actually pretty good because, you like I mentioned, the auto shop, You're not going to give a guy a grinder on the first day. You want him to have some basic knowledge. So now I'll go ahead and we will talk about the revolver course. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about FTH-202, which is the revolver course. Here's the revolver you get, and just to make sure, you can see that she's clear, visibly and physically clear. I put these on after the fact, and these are the actual grips that came with it. And one note I want to make about this revolver here is that I broke this thumb screw during the course, and my instructor, he gave me an out and just said I could talk through it, but one of the things I did is I actually took a screw off a different revolver, and from what I had learned, I had filed it down and polished it down and was able to make it operational. I wouldn't have shot it, but I made it operational enough to where I could talk through and work through my assignment. Now, as far as that broken piece, I just had to get to shipping, SDI shipping, and they sent it to me, right away. So if you do break something, you will get a replacement. Now, all these modules are pretty thick here. This is the course material for revolvers, and the modules go 1 through 5. So you're learning history, legal, you're learning single action versus double action, disassembly, reassembly, malfunctions, rifling, trigger weights, polishing, sanding, filing. You do some spring changes in there, you do headspace. At the end of every course, there is a reflections assignment you have to do. So I talk through all the stuff that you learned. But what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to go ahead and cut in some of my assignments so you can see what I did. All right, so here we're going to be measuring the rifling or the twist rate of the rifling. We have a magnet at the back of our barrel here, and I'm using this modified cleaning pad here, or patch. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this clearing rod here on a swivel, and I've made a flag here, as you can see, the blue flag. And once I set it here, get a little bite, I'm going to mark where the barrel entry is here with a pencil. And then I'm keeping this flag at the 12 o'clock position. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to push it forward, and you'll watch the flag move. We'll probably get a 1/8 turn here. And then from there, we will measure it again. Okay, see, we've stopped at the end of the barrel because of our magnet. Now we're going to mark it again. And after this, we will get the measurement and the twist rate. All right, we're going to go ahead and measure our twist rate here. So this is our first mark, and this is our second mark at the end of the crown. And we got right around 2.1 inches. So 2.1 times 8, which was a 1/8 twist, we would be right around 16.8, and the manufacturer specifications are 16.5. So we'd be right in that area. So our twist rate is good. All right, guys, here we are going to apply our layout fluid to the high points or some of the main working areas of our pistol here. We're going to be doing parts of the frame, parts of the side plate, the hand, the cylinder stop, the hammer, and we'll be doing some of the trigger as well. All right, guys, now we're just going to let this dry, and we will put it together. We'll do some cycle of operations. We will disassemble it, and then we're going to work on our high points. All right, guys, as you can see, I put a little bit of oil on my sanding stick here, and I'm going to start working on this high point here. And importantly, how I was taught to do it is you want to go in a circular motion. It's just like sharpening an axe or a knife. You're going in a circular motion, and then you're going to go in the opposite way. I'm using a 600 grit here, so it's not too powerful. I am not using the needlepoint files because I think they are too much for what I need right now. To show you real quick how I'm using this ceramic file here, I'm using it in the same way that I'm using the other files and other sanders. We're going in a circular motion. We want to make sure we have oil on here. If you get dry, I'll just put a little dab of oil. All right, guys, here is our polish weapon. I ended up doing 2 runs.
I mostly stuck to the 800 just because I thought 600 was too much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to blue these. We're going to put them back together and we will get a trigger weight. And that is 5 1/4. So we'll call that 5 1/4. And we were at 5.5 before, so we've dropped it down 1/4 pound. Next, we are going to change our springs, and we'll see in a minute. All right, so let's go ahead and change the main spring. All right, same with our trigger spring here. We are going to go ahead and take this block off here and our paper clip out. So we're going to push down. We have some tension, so make sure you're watching it. All right, now we are separated. I'm going to go ahead and wipe her down, and we're going to go ahead and reassemble with this new spring. All right, let's go ahead and do our final pull weights. Okay, so we went from 11.1 pounds in double action to 9 pounds in double action and 5.5 pounds in single action to about 3.15 pounds in single action. Lastly, we're going to go through headspace. What we're going to do is we're going to try our go and our no-go. I'm not going to make you go through all of it with me, every single chamber, but I'm going to show you really quickly how this works. So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my go round in here. I'm going to mark the chamber I'm working on, just so I know where I am. I'm going to make sure it chambers. Okay, and then I'm going to cock it back and see if I can get it fired. And as you can see, it's going to make it all the way through, and that's exactly what we want. Our no-go gauge should not be able to chamber. And this is for the same with every single round. As you can see, it doesn't chamber. And we want that for every single chamber as well. So just to show you what I mean, it doesn't chamber in this one either. Okay, and that's exactly what we want. We do not want our no-go headspace to chamber. And that is how you do the headspace on the Taurus 856.
All right, so let's go ahead and talk about FTH-202, which is the striker fire course. And you get this dagger here. Let's go ahead and make sure she's clear. See, there's nothing in the magazine, and the chamber is visibly and physically clear. Now, obviously, it doesn't come like this. I'll go ahead and flash something on the screen here to show you how it comes. It actually comes fully disassembled, and you have to put it together. Now, within the course, as you can see, it's another thick one. They're all pretty thick. And you go through history and legal, you go through cycle of operations, you do functions checks, you do disassembly and reassembly, of course, malfunctions, you get the trigger weights, you learn some of the trigger work, how to do the trigger work. And as you can see, you do stippling and modifications. As you can see, some of these are the modifications I made myself. And as you can see, I did put a Timney trigger in here, and I changed just about everything on it. And also, like all the other courses, you close out with the reflections assignment. And what I didn't mention in Revolvers is when you do your reflections, you do 10 lessons learned, and you go over weapons health, and there might be some other stuff in there. So it's pretty comprehensive. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and cut in some of my assignments.
So let's go ahead, and what I'm going to do is going to let this slide go forward slowly. And I'm going to bring it back just a little bit, and I'm going to pull down on this slide lock here. Okay, and then once I have these slide locks back, I'm going to pull the trigger, and that is going to allow our slide to come off. What I'm doing with my left hand is I have my thumb over the recoil spring here, that way it doesn't pop out and hurt someone. And then what we're going to do is just take that out. It's kind of hard to do with gloves on. Go ahead and take that recoil spring out, our barrel, and our slide. So these are our four main components, and we'll go ahead and break these down in a minute. So this is chambered in 9mm, and the barrel is simple. And as you know, locking is one of the 8 rifling functions, or one of the 8 cycle of operations. Let's talk about our next main assembly here, and that is the recoil spring. And you guys saw us put it together in one of the last videos. Our slide here, we have several pieces and subcomponents within our slide. All right, guys, let's go ahead and talk about our frame here. Our frame has several sub-assemblies in here.
All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and disassemble this and get it ready for stippling. All right, guys, so we have her taped up here. So before we do anything, I'm going to talk about what we're going to do. We're obviously going to do the grips here. and we'll be using our rotary for that. I'm using this small point here just so I have more control, and we'll see later on if we have to change anything. Alright guys, you can see we got this side done. So this side is already ground down, and you can see this side here where we haven't done it yet. So we're going to go ahead and work on this side, and then we'll work on the trigger well here. Yeah, that gives me a little more off. Let's start stippling. Have both sides finished here. I'm not super happy with it, but what I would expect from a first time run. Actually, the texture ended up better than I thought it would, so I'm going to use this same stippler on the front end here. The finished product here. So real quick, we're going to talk about what we did. First, we practiced on our practice stipple pads and found some designs and learned a little bit of the process of stippling, and as well as grinding down our stippling area before we work on it. After that, we went ahead and practiced stippling and found a design that we liked most. Then of course we showed how we laid it out on here, how we were going to do it, and all the changes that we made. Here we are reassembled.
I quickly talk about the health of a weapon here. When we're talking about the health of a weapon, we're talking about the internal components, not necessarily the exterior of the weapon. If we were judging this weapon off its exterior, it'd be dead already. So let's go ahead, when we're talking about health, let's talk about the barrel first because it's the easiest. Because there's not too many things that can go wrong with it because it's just a chunk of metal. But one portion being the feed ramp here. Now next, our recoil spring. This one's also pretty easy. If you have issues with the recoil spring, it's probably going to be the spring itself. Now next onto our slide, we have several sub-assemblies in here and areas of interest. Now let's get into the big component of this weapon and where most of the action happens, and that is the frame. Talk a little bit about the 10 lessons learned from the FTH-202 course. Assembly and disassembly components and sub-assemblies of this weapon. The cycle of operations. The cycle of operations is something that I learned as well, because although it is always the same 8 functions in the cycle of operations, it sometimes works differently. The functions check, which is completely different from something like the Taurus A56 or an M2. We also learned a little bit about the headspace, so those are different. Also, the barrel length. We learned a little bit about trigger work here. We learned how to swap these out. Porting is something that I learned from here. The one thing we learned, and the elephant in the room here, is stippling. So we learned how to stipple this firearm. And don't worry, I'm not going to take this weapon out of the house because, I won't have any friends anymore. So those are some of the 10 lessons we learned.
All right, now let's go ahead and talk about the last course, which is FTH-223, and this is hammer-fired pistols. Now, this is not the pistol you get with that course. You get a SAR B6, and the reason you get the SAR B6 is, 1, they already have a 1911 course. 2, the SAR B6 is both double action and single action, whereas this is single action only. And 3, the SAR, because it is pretty complex. So, once I learned how to do that one, this 1911 came pretty easily. As you can see, it is clear and there's no magazine in it. Now also here you can see this mass driver, or compensator, however you want to call it. Now this one doesn't go onto the SAR. It actually, you got to pull out that dagger again and put this compensator on there. Now, as you can see, I have it in 2 books here. This first module is thicker than most of the other ones combined. There's a lot of stuff in there. And actually, I learned quite a bit in that module. That module actually covers a bit of working with the 1911. So I was able to do that. I didn't have to watch any YouTube videos to learn how to do it. So it's pretty comprehensive, this last final hammerfire course. So you also go through history, legal, cycle of operations, disassembly, reassembly, and modifications like the compensator, and closing out with reflections in your last week. So I will go ahead and I'll show you some of my assignments. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is make sure this weapon is clear. So you guys can see it's clear, and then we'll do a quick little field strip of it. So let's go ahead and look at the components here. So we have our guide rod, and there's a spring in there. And then we have the actual recoil spring, and within this kit is our little buffer, and I'll show you how that goes into there. And there's some Loctite and a little Allen wrench. Okay, so let's go ahead and take this front block off here, and that spring in there. Okay, we got that on there. Now we're going to go ahead and set our compensator on. So we put the spring back into the compensator, and let's grab our block. Okay, now we have the compensator into our barrel. Now let's go ahead and reassemble it. Let's do a functions check. Make sure that safety's working. All right, and that is a successful functions check. So this is the PSA dagger with the mass driver on it. All right, so let's go ahead and start with the field strip here. And that is this weapon completely disassembled. So this is what she looks like, completely disassembled. Let's go ahead and make a space for us here so I can show you. And that is the SAR B6 completely disassembled. All right, so let's go ahead and get into part 4 of this. And we have our components here, +1, and we have our diagrams drawn out. This could be a 40-hour course itself, just learning how to do it, because I'm not really inclined to do this kind of stuff. But so our first was to do the recoil spring guide. And you can see we drew it out here. We have our dimensions. We even have some of the degrees. And I made sure I put the little nipple here on the end. And this is the front view here. And this is the back view here. So that's how we did this one. Now our next one was the firing pin. So we have a firing pin here, and right, top, left. So as you can see, this one is going this way, and this one has some of the degrees and some of the other measurements here. And of course that is facing from the top. And then here we have our left hand side. We have the dimensions that are going north and south. And let's do a military flip. And we have the front end, or the pin side of it. So there's the diameters for the pin, the front part of it. And flip it over. And we have our rear side of it. We have the dimensions and the degrees. And that is for the firing pin. Next we have our ejector here, not extractor. And I only did this part of it. I didn't do the entire sear assembly or sear housing. So I just basically did from here over and here over. So We have our dimensions from left, right, and top. You can see military flip, and we also have our front facing and the rear facing as best I could. My poor drawing skills. And since I don't know how to read, I went ahead and did the extractor before I did the ejector, and this one was pretty difficult. So here is the one for the ejector. Our dimensions, left, right, and top, front, as you can see, and the rear, as you can see. So this is, as you can see here, this part kind of angles down, so I try to capture that as best as I could here. One tool I used to gauge the holes were these little dowels, and that made it super easy. I'm finally glad I got to use these tools here. And these are the diagrams for the selected pieces plus one. Now we're going to go ahead and get this bad boy reassembled. Oh, slide release back in. Okay. And then let's go ahead and do a functions check. So let's go ahead and do a dummy round functions check here. And I have 4 dummy rounds in 9mm. So we can check the rest here. So let's go ahead and make sure she feeds and chambers correctly. Okay, so that worked. We didn't have any issues there. Fire. Okay, let's eject this round. Check that trigger reset and the trigger. Okay, again. Okay. Again. Okay, now this is going to be the last round here, so our slide should lock to the rear. And she does. So we have a successful dry and dummy round functions check. All right, so let's go ahead and get into resources and networking. So here I'm just going to flash some stuff on the screen. I'll flash the different portals you're going to use. So one thing you get is you get Office. So you get Microsoft Office, and that has Outlook. So you get an email, you get Teams, you have Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc. And you also have, this is where you'll upload some of your assignments to. So that's where you can upload your assignments and then you can access them later. That way you have ownership of them, essentially. So there are going to be some cases where you use Word or you use PowerPoint, just depending on how you do it. And you can also upload your video assignments here as well. Now here you have the SDI portal. I'm not going to go through everything here, but you have your advisors, you have your academics, so your progression as well as your transcript once you're completed. Your profile is just basically your own information. Your finances are going to be, you know, depending on if you're getting a GI Bill or you're paying yourself, that's going to be show your balance. And then there's some career services and some documents when you start going to the school that you'll actually have to upload. Now for Canvas, as you can see here, you can access all your courses. The SDI Student Success Center, it has discounts. Canvas also has emails as well. So I'll go ahead and we'll go into Revolvers. And if you go into Revolvers, for example, here, you can see that you can go into the announcements, modules, and grades. So here you can see the different modules, and you have your reading and resources, instructor guidance, the actual lectures you get, and you can also upload your assignments from here. Here you can go ahead and you can check your grades as well to see how well you're doing, and your instructor will leave you feedback, and there's rubrics in there, and then you can actually see how well you're doing compared to your classmates. Now discussions was probably one of the most beneficial aspects of Canvas. And discussions aren't too hard. It's just basically you get prompted for questions. There's a word minimum, and then you interact with your other classmates. And It's actually pretty great. I learned quite a bit from there because it's a mix of novices, masters, like master gunsmiths, machinists, military members. There's all kinds of people that are in there that you can bounce ideas off, and they're going to bounce ideas off you too. So as long as you're trying to do stuff, then you're going to learn from the discussions. Now, one of the other great assets of the SDI school is the Discord. I learned a ton from the Discord. There's like 2,000 members in the Discord, and there's scores of channels in there, ranging from, general topics to student, faculty, and chat to links and info. There's going to be memes in there. So that's a great asset. There's some really great people in there that are actual real gunsmiths, really great gunsmiths. And if you have questions, they will get you answers. Now we're going to go ahead and we'll talk about instructors and staff. So you will get a coach, you'll get a finance advisor, and you'll get a career advisor. You can email these guys at any time. My coach was awesome. If I ever had to ask a question, I could just text him and he would text me back with any answers that he could get for me. And that's a great asset as well. Now for the instructors themselves, I had some really good instructors. I know that not all of my classmates got along with my instructors. I got along well with my instructors. I had one instructor that was outstanding. Guy was exemplary. I could write that guy at 11:30 at night or 6 in the morning, and he would get back to me as soon as he could. And, he's my mentor. I can still write him now, and he will still respond to help me. So the instructors, in my experience, were pretty great. So I was really happy with what I learned from the instructors, and they're always contactable. Final thoughts on this Handgun Specialist course. Was it worth it? To me, it was. It was worth it to me. I learned a ton. I continue to learn and make videos, trying to make the best instructional videos I can. I used to be an Army instructor, and I had an accident, so it kind of took me out of that game. And this kind of helped me help others because I get joy from helping others. And as far as like the resources, I still have access to all the resources. The Discord is great. Like I said, there's everyone in there. There's novices, there's gunsmiths, there's all kinds of people. The instructors, some of the instructors are in there as well. Now, as far as the GI Bill, I've heard some whining and crying about the GI Bill. I did use my GI Bill. I only had a few months left on it. I'd never used it before, and most people do not use their GI Bill. And I wanted to use mine. I wanted to learn a new skill. I felt I had an obligation to do my best. I didn't want to defraud the government or waste all this time on something that I don't enjoy. Now, there are some students that attend just to get the money, and which I highly disagree with. That's not how you do things, especially if you're former military guys. You shouldn't be doing that kind of stuff. And I also didn't know that I got to keep these weapons at the end. So that was kind of a bonus. I always thought I had to turn these back in when I first started. And I understand they may not be the greatest weapons either. You don't give a 16-year-old learning how to drive a Bugatti. So I understand that as well. Now, is it for everyone? No, it's not. College isn't for everyone. Trades aren't for everyone. For example, when I turned 18 years old, I went to college. I wanted to be a geologist. I thought I was going to be digging in the ground for cool rocks or gold or silver, and that's not what it was. It was basically learning formations, and if you're going to make money in geology, you look at sand for a huge oil company. That's how you make money in geology. So that wasn't for me. So if you are going to do it, do your own research, talk to people that have gone through the course and completed the course, and not some salty dropouts who couldn't complete it. Do I consider myself a gunsmith? No, I do not. At best, a journeyman or a hobbyist. I did learn quite a bit, and like I said earlier, I'd like to continue my education and learning more about gunsmithing before I would ever consider myself a gunsmith. This isn't going to make you a master gunsmith, just so you guys know. You will not be a master gunsmith at the end of all these courses, whether you take the associates or, the certificate programs. Just like a 2-year degree for a paramedic doesn't make them a surgeon. It takes years of experience to achieve those kinds of levels. But I will say you will probably learn enough, and you might be able to get your foot in the door, and you can work under an experienced gunsmith, which is, how apprenticeship works. And my final words here are, just because you can't or don't want to do something, it doesn't mean you should shit on others that can or want to. Be humble or get humbled. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you for your time, and stay frosty.